Welcome everybody to episode number 19 of My Relationship with a Narc, the series that's been really kind of taking the channel by storm. It's a very different kind of programming, and I think people are really learning and growing from it, and I appreciate your comments. Today's guest is Trina Bryant. She writes that she's a 52-year-old female currently living in Florida, former business owner, unpublished writer, crafter, and has earned several college degrees, including a second master's rather, in human resources. So she got some brains on her. She's a single mom of 5 and currently raising two, not one, two special needs sons. So this lady, she's got some juice that I don't have. I don't know about the rest of you. So let me get her on here. What's up, Trina?
Hey, Deb.
Hey, I'm so glad that you're here.
I am ecstatic. I've been pushing everything all day. I was like, I got to be on this. I have to be on here today. So
I'm glad. Well, let's start, I gave the overview that you might say, in your job interview. Tell us about yourself. But, who are you? Tell us, about what makes you be you.
I'm 52. I have been down a very long road to discovering who I am, what I want, what I will accept, and what I will not accept. I have, of course, very high tolerance with just having two special needs children. They teach you a great deal of tolerance and acceptance, and I think the blessing for me with them is that they taught me, they love me for who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to showboat. I don't have to put on airs. I don't even have to put on makeup. As long as I feed them, they're happy. And, as long as
that's sons for you.
As long as there's food in the refrigerator, life is good in their world. So, right. I don't have to be anybody else than who I am.
So it sounds like that's been kind of a road to get there. Is that what I'm hearing behind these words?
It's been a really long road. I know that in most of your interviews, you always asked about the beginning.
Well, there's always a start.
Yeah. And so the beginning with me started when I was about 8 years old. I was raised by a single mom with 5 children. And she was not only raising all 5 of us, she was also taking care of her elderly mother. And around the time that I turned 8, I just recall my uncle, who was her brother, coming to pick up my sister and I, and telling us, we're going to go spend the summer with him, which was fine. We lived in New York, and they lived in South Carolina. We had never been there before. So, they said, hey, we're going to take you to South Carolina and you're going to spend the summer with us. Well, that summer ended up being about 6 years long. And what we eventually found out years later was that because around that same time, my grandmother, who was my mom's mother, had passed. And it was actually the time of her funeral that they came and, he told us that. So, we just figured, we're going to go spend the summer with him, and we're going to go back home and everything. And some years later, we found out that apparently my mom had a nervous breakdown and had been hospitalized.
Oh, she didn't deal with the loss of her mom very well.
Well, it had been a lot of stress, being single, raising, 5 kids, and, she was a nurse, so she was working all different types of hours, and whatever else was going on in the background, I was never aware of because I was only 8 years old. All I knew was life was good. And, from that point on, I had also found out that my younger brother and sister, my uncle didn't take them, so they ended up in foster care. My older brother, my mom had actually put him out before we had left. So there's a lot of things that were going on that I wasn't aware of, because my little young 8-year-old self, all I knew was life is great.
Well, that's all you're supposed to know at 8.
And, you know, once we moved in with my aunt and uncle is pretty much when the abuse started. It took, you know, it was pretty much years of us being put against each other. My sister is a couple of years older than I am, and it would always be, oh, she does this better than you. Oh, she does that better than you. Oh, she's cuter than you. Oh, she looks, you know, she's smarter than you. So it was always, you know, that one against the other.
Is
And
that both the aunt and the uncle, or just one?
it was more of the aunt, but my uncle was one of those whatever my wife says goes type
I
people.
see.
And so, you know, that was just how it was for years. You know, the discipline was the old school form of discipline, was you get a spanking with the extension cords, to the point that I still have the marks on me from some of the beatings, and I'm 52.
Yeah, see, that's not a quote spanking. That's the old slave term, a whipping.
Right.
Oh boy.
And you know, one of the worst parts of growing up was when the movie Roots came out, because my aunt was a short hair, dark skinned woman with a lot of, I guess, blotches or whatever on her face. So she never deemed herself pretty. I was a little yellow, long haired child.
Oh, I know where this is going.
So I was the house girl, and she was the plantation worker person. So, so mind you, I was probably about 12 at this time. My aunt was years older than I, but there was jealousy there. To the point, you know, I was thinking about some of the things that I wanted to talk about on your show. And, you know, growing up, my aunt never taught me anything about being a girl. And when I mean she never taught me, she didn't even teach me about a menstrual cycle.
Oh boy.
She didn't teach me that when you turn a certain age, you're going to need protection. I learned that because by accident, one young lady in my school had her cycle come on, and everybody teased her. And for whatever reason, intuition kicked in, and I stored that. And so when I don't even know how I knew, but you know, we were never taught those things. You know, I grew up, for me personally, I grew up being the invisible child in the house. So they just pretty much ignored me. If
Did they have children, you know, their own children, plus you and your sister?
No.
Just you two. Okay.
Just us two. So we were kind of like the goodwill children. They taught, it's kind of like when they took us in, we were like the sympathy case. So nobody else wanted us, and, you know, we're going to turn out to be like our mom, and, you know, just some things that they would say to us.
My God.
And so, you know, growing up in that atmosphere was very traumatic. I recall one time my sister spoke back to my uncle, and she had to have been like 15 or 16. And when I tell you, he beat her to a pulp, to where she went to school with her face different colors. So, you know, we went through a lot of trauma growing up that we had never experienced before. I had never met my father. If my father walked across the street from me, I wouldn't know who he is. I've never met him. So, you know, I didn't have the interaction growing up with a male, a positive male or a positive female. So as I started getting older, I just took on a totally different personality, because I wanted to be liked by people, because I wanted to be accepted. When you grow up in the shadows, you grow up in the shadows of people not even paying you any attention, not speaking. I mean, they literally would not speak to me. I would be in the same house with them. They would not speak to me. So I was kind of a blur.
And that lasted until, how old were you when you finally got out of there?
I was 14. And what happened was, they got to the point where my sister got tired of it and she left. And so she left me there with them. And when she left, they really ignored me. And what they would do is, when they would leave in the morning, they would put me out the house. And I think I was about 13 or 14 by this time.
So 13-year-old girl just wandering the neighborhood?
Just wandering the neighborhood, until whatever time they decided to come in the evening is when I was able to come home. So if they were out and they didn't come home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, I was out until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night. And what I would do, what I started doing was, there was in South Carolina, there's a hospital there that's a medical university. And and I would go there and start reading the books, because I was always a reader. I would always read everything in the house. And so I would just go in there and spend hours reading. And then I started actually latching on to a young lady that I had met at school. And hold on. That I had met at school. And the night that my aunt and uncle had actually put me out, what happened was, I came to the door to be let in, and they said, "No, we're not letting you in."
And you were how?
I was 14.
Okay.
And so I went back to my classmate's house, and her mom, who was also now a single mom, walked me back to the house, and they said, "No, we're not going to let her in." Because let me go back. When I could no longer stay at the library, or, you know, wherever I would go during the day, I actually started hanging out with this girl that was in my school during the day. And of course, when she would go home, you know, she'd go home to her family, and I would have to find things to do later on in the evening.
Right.
So I would start hanging out with her during the day. And so, to the point that it became a habit for me to just hang out with them. They didn't really know what was going on. They didn't know that I just couldn't go home. But it was just some place for me to be, as opposed to being out. So right. I stayed there. And so when I tried to go home that night, and they were like, "No, we're not going to let her in." You know, her mom walked me back there, and they just like, "No, she's not coming back." So her mom took me in, and I ended up staying there until I was about 16, because I graduated high school when I was 16. And so, I mean, and even in that, moving from that household, my aunt and uncle, to the new household, I was abused then because, you know, this person's children were never wrong. And so I was the one who would clean the house or cook or do whatever, you know, just to have a house or just to have some place to stay.
Oh boy. Okay, so you have, you know, several college degrees now.
Mm-hmm.
So evidently at some point you left out of there and you went to college.
Right. I left, I got my first degree when I was 21. I have an associate's degree in computer science. And then later on, I got a bachelor's degree in business management. And then that's when the narcs started coming. My first husband, I met him. I was actually dating a gentleman and a young guy that I had met. And him and I have been dating for a while. And I'd always thought he was so much smarter than I was. And I didn't think I was really worthy of him. And so he actually left and went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And when he left not too long before it was time for me to go to finish high school. And I was working at this clothing store and this guy came in and he just stared at me. And I just looked at him like, what are you staring at? And he started talking. He had actually came in with his girlfriend. He was staring at me. He left her and came back and gave me his phone number. I should have known then. He ended up being my first husband.
So how much older was he than you?
He was actually just a year older than me. He wasn't that much older than me.
Okay.
Yeah. And he ended up being my first husband. And that's when, you know, I had already had a history of abuse. But with him, the first time he actually hit me was when I found out that he had me and another young lady pregnant at the same time. That he, not only were we pregnant at the same time, her child was born a month after my son was born. And what had happened was I confronted him about it because it was like our wedding day. And I confronted him about it. And because he was angry that I had known about it, he beat me until I blacked out for several hours.
Hours?
Yeah.
Ooh, Trina, girl.
Yeah.
So how old were you when this happened?
I was probably about 20, 21, 22.
So you just finished school. Okay.
Right. You know, over the years, it became more and more, it was he was the first person that I experienced jealousy with. And I remember the first time it hit me, it was just like a wave of emotions that I never experienced before. And it was hurt, it was sadness, it was pain. I mean, he would have girls calling me and, you know, it was just absolutely crazy. I tried to leave him several times and he actually had put a gun to my head and said, you know, he's going to kill me first and then kill himself. And our kids were right upstairs asleep. And, you know, I got to the point where I stopped even fighting. And the end part was I had actually left there, and I went and moved to Atlanta where my sister was. This was years later. And he was supposed to come, but he chose not to come because I found out later he was cheating on me with somebody else. And so I moved to Atlanta, and that's when I separated from him and I didn't go back.
So you dipped out. Okay, that's good. She like,
I mean,
deuces.
after he had put a gun to me several times. I mean, and he actually picked me up at one point and threw me on, in South Carolina, they have those real old trees that have the roots and everything growing out the ground.
Mm-hmm.
He had actually lifted me up and threw me on to the root to where my back is still, messed up. But he his stepfather used to abuse his mom. And she actually was angry at me because I left him. And I told her, I said, he used to beat me. She's like, I don't believe you. He would never do that because he knew what I went through. As a matter of fact, the abuse stopped with his stepfather because he jumped his stepfather when his stepfather was beating his mom. And so she said, why would he ever hit you? He knew what I went through. Why would he? And I was like, okay. And then later on, she finally found out that he really was.
Yeah, I
So,
would imagine that would be somewhat of a shock for her because, I mean, I'm not saying that, she's crazy or anything, but I can understand her confusion. It's like you witnessed the pain and drama. What in the world are you doing?
right.
I could understand how she would think that.
But then
So
that was her only son and, her baby. This was a man that, if I didn't cook for him, he would get on the phone and call his mom and say, she's not cooking for me. And she would get
you
out
gotta
of
be
bed.
kidding me.
She would get out of bed and go cook for him. Yeah.
He would starve. He would starve. You better get in your car and go to fast food. You would just starve. Oh my God.
He made me so mad one day because I went and cooked him all of his food and he made a comment about the food. And I went into such a rage that I took everything and threw it in the garbage. And right in front of him, I took everything and threw it in the garbage. And I said, you won't eat today. And yeah, I didn't care.
Ungrateful pond scum.
I was like, go to your mother. So that's what he did.
Okay, so now we get past NARC 1. I'm taking it that there's a second one here.
Oh yeah, I've been married 3 times, Deb.
What?
When I listened to you I was like, I know she would say, okay, take your hand all the way back.
All the way back here. Back, keep reaching.
And pimp slap yourself. Good. I was just, I met the second one on the swipey thing.
No.
Oh my God.
Not that.
On the swipey thing. I met him and I think, as I look back at it, a lot of my decision making was because I always felt that I needed to have a man in my house to help me raise my sons. And because my thought was always, it was always, you can't teach a man to be a man. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll get a husband and he can help me out. And I ended up raising him and my kids.
I was getting ready to say, are you sure you didn't have 3 kids? Girl.
And he was the biggest. He was the biggest one. He's my youngest son's father. And he was verbally abusive. He never hit me because I think he thought somewhere deep inside of me I was crazy. Yeah. But he was verbally abusive.
It's not a bad thing. I can't be mad at that.
As long as he thought that, then he lived longer. So yeah, I think he knew that I had some, part of the devil in me somewhere. He just didn't know when it was going to escape.
Look at that little innocent face. Who would think that? Over there looking like you have wings and a halo.
Yeah. My sister told me one time, she said, you were the kind of person that, you know, you would smile at somebody and burn them while they're sleeping in the bedroom. I was like, well,
My girl.
but yeah, he was something else. And the last one, he was insecure. He was, you know, I don't even know what I was going through with him. I think it was a combination of loneliness. I dreaded being alone. I dreaded being by myself. You know, I just remembered spending days by myself, not talking to anybody, not having anybody with me. And honestly, the thing about that was when I was growing up, it didn't bother me to be alone until somebody told me you need friends. Because I didn't have a real problem being alone, if that makes sense.
No,
I didn't
totally.
know.
You didn't know that it was a bad thing, so you just dealt with it.
Right. I didn't, and this is before, you know, the whole situation with my aunt and uncle having me. I didn't know there was something wrong with me reading all day long, or drawing all day long, or doing something all day long. I was occupied. I kept myself occupied until somebody said, well, you don't have any friends. You need to go find you some friends, you know, and hang out with people. And then I realized there's something wrong with me. I'm different.
So tell me, when you reflect back on those 3 relationships, do you remember how you felt about yourself at those times? What was going on with you that motivated you to choose those particular guys?
I think they made my first, I actually chose him because he was my punishment. He like I said, he was the one I had cheated on my boyfriend with. And when I felt guilty. And so because I had done this, I needed to be punished for it. And so that was my punishment for cheating. Because, you know, I had been through, I always felt like, you know, when you do something wrong, when you're a parent, when parents raising their children and they tell them, well, you do this wrong, you're going to be punished for it. And if you do something bad, you're going to be punished for it. And he was my punishment.
Okay. So then what about the other 2? So he was your punishment. That's very interesting. Okay.
The other 2 were more of, I was lonely. I didn't want to be by myself. I didn't like the fear of being alone. And so I picked somebody that I could be with and not be alone. Not that they were worthy of me, because actually the last one told me, I said, do you know who I am? He said, oh, I know exactly who you are. And I couldn't figure out what he meant. And what it basically meant was, you're better than what I deserve. Because he was not educated. He didn't work for the first 3 years that we were together.
Oh, hell no. Dusty.
I took care of him and my kids. And so, you know, with him, he got, you know, when you get to that point that you say, when you get to enough.
Yeah. I
got to enough. We were together for 5 years. We got married. And on our 1-year anniversary, I divorced him.
Get it, girl. Look at you. So you cutting down the time of these relationships.
Yeah.
Like 10, 1 year.
And you'll be so proud of me because I haven't been with anybody since.
Well,
And that
that's
was,
probably a good thing. That means
yeah.
that you're growing and learning to understand how important it is to spend time with yourself.
And I've been busy every day. I'm exhausted when I get to bed. Um, um, I'm training my mind. I just got my master's degree last year, so I got it without somebody else being in my life. Because when I asked him, I was going to get a degree when I was with him, and I said, "Should I do this?" And he said, "Only if it makes you happy," or something stupid he said. And so the time that I'm spending by myself, I'm full and I'm happy, and I'm not getting up and having to do something because somebody else wants me to do it. If I don't want to fix my hair today, I don't have to go and do it. I don't have to throw on makeup, or I am happy in my inner me.
Good for
And
you.
that's just the best piece. Yeah.
So now, as you've gone through this process and you analyze your early relationships and the abuse that you dealt with there versus what was going on in your other relationships, do you see any parallels?
I see that when you feel like you're missing something, you're always going to try to fill that void. And a lot of the times is if you step back long enough to reflect, you'll find that nothing's really missing. The abuse that a lot of the abuse that I went through, it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the people that I was surrounding myself with, because they thought they saw something in me that they did not like. They didn't see, like, they saw a better me than they saw in themselves. And it
So
was
they were
easier,
haters. They were haters.
right? It was easier for them to bring me down so that they could step over me than to show me who I was. When I found out who I was, when I started listening to Deb, no, you can't tell me anything. You can't even, some of the things that I saw myself doing back then, you can step out of yourself. Sometimes you step and look and go, what are you
Yes,
doing?
isn't that kind of creepy though? But you said part of you is doing this, looking at the rest of the other part of you saying, girl, what you doing? Girl, I don't know.
And it doesn't help them. I'm a Gemini, because my twin is like, what are you doing? So yeah, I mean, I have grown, I have, I think a lot of it too, Deb, that I hear people talk about is the whole thing with church.
Were you a church goer?
I was an avid church goer.
Ew.
I could tell you the quotes in the Bible like nobody's business until I started paying attention to what they were saying. And how it always seems as if the woman was always the one in the wrong for the situation that was going on. I ask people all the time, I said, well, explain to me how it is that the woman that was caught in the act of adultery was about to be stoned by herself. If she was caught in adultery, wasn't she caught with somebody? So why was they stoning her and not the man that she was with? It's just always one-sided. And I would always get, if you ask a man, well, that they were just teaching, no.
They always have excuses to excuse themselves and other men from their crimes and charging women with everything with everything. You're exactly right. That's why I'm like, oh, church, ew.
And mind you, I was a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh.
I was a Jehovah's Witness for years. I was, Baptist, non-denominational. And it was always the same thing. It's always, well, these women need a man in their lives, and they need, they need to have, this husband, and they always push you to stay with this man. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm okay.
Good for you, Trina. That takes, once people have been, from this series and something else I did last year, it just seems like, that the church has a lot to do with women accepting a lot of nonsense and abuse. I don't know what they teach, especially these are like little girls. What are you doing to these children that gets them to, to grow up and have this mindset? It's very disturbing to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it just it makes you feel as if you don't have the, like the Proverbs, woman. I'm sitting here going, she's doing a lot of work. She's putting in a lot of work for this man who can go out and do anything he wants to do. And she still has to come home and make sure the house is clean. She still has to make sure the kids are taken care of. She has to be the business owner. She has to do all of this. And he could walk away from her at any time. And back then, if he walked away and left her, she couldn't get married again. So it's like, they make you feel like there's no benefit to being a woman, but we are just so much stronger than they make us out to be.
Oh, girl, that's an absolute mind. You know what? That women think that they are weaker, that they need to submit, that men no more are better, stronger, faster, can leap tall buildings in a single bound, can do all of this stuff, and that women cannot. There's like, women are 10 times better than men on every level.
It was funny because my second husband, when he lost his job, he was going through some depression. And I said, he got to the point that he was getting on my nerves. So I said, okay, listen, we're going to sit down. We're going to talk. We're going to figure this out. If you could do anything, what would you do? And he said, I want a computer store. Within 6 months, I had already opened the store, bought everything for the store, paid all the bills for the store, did the taxes for the store, ran the store, and put him in it. That computer store was successful for years.
Oh.
And at first he was like, I don't want it. And then as he started seeing the money coming in, it's my store now. I said, okay, you can have it. And I stepped away from it, and it went down.
Of course it did. That's what I don't understand. When guys, they say they have a dream, it's like that should be your number one priority then to make it a success. I mean, this is what you said you wanted. What happened?
He was not a people person. He's not a people person. And people would call me in the store when he's talking to them and say, Trina, I need you to talk to him because I need you to translate to me what he's saying.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, what? And so I would say, put him on the phone, and he would say something. So he would try to talk technology. And of course, you're trying to talk tech savvy to somebody that doesn't know anything about tech.
Right.
So he would say it to me, and I said, okay, put her back on the phone. And I say, he wants to let you know he's uploading Word into your computer. Do you want it? And they go, is that what he's trying to say? I said, yeah. It's like, oh my God. He's the reason why I went to business school, because my thought was, if we're going to own a successful business, one of us needs to know business or be business minded. And I went and got my bachelor's in business and then my MBA. I would do all of our taxes, everything that I learned. I did because I thought that we needed that. And then he decided he didn't want to be married anymore. That's what he told me. He said, I don't want to be married anymore. I'm leaving. And I said, okay. He packed up everything in the store and took it and left. He wiped out the bank accounts and he left. And I said, Okay.
Wow. Well, as we wind down here, so let's give you some, I want to give you an opportunity to, kind of sum up your advice,
Okay.
for young women coming behind you after listening to this story and your experience with 3 really interesting narcs. I mean, just not to mention your uncle and your auntie, they up in there too. So you count them, you're on 5. And, I'm sure you've given this a lot of thought over the years. So what would you suggest people look out for, do when they run into a narc, handle themselves when they have these weird feelings and thoughts about themselves? What is Trina's suggestion for
I actually wrote a
success?
couple. I actually wrote a couple down, so I'm gonna read them off real quick. The first
Oh,
one is
go ahead.
stop putting your talents in the deep freezer for later. So many women are put their talents off until later, and later never comes. If you have talents, start using your talents. Go and do that thing that you like and stop waiting on somebody else to give you approval to do it. The other is stop trying to be everyone's go-to person. Every time somebody calls you, you get up and you go run to them. You go do it. You go, oh, I can do it. I can do this. No, start saying no. Learn the word no and start saying it freely. Stop trying to be everyone's counselor. Some people cannot afford your payments. Um, be your own self-promoter. I learned that from you. Don't invest in any man that can't afford to invest in himself. And teach your children differently than when you were taught. We have a generation of enabled children who don't learn anything, who are rewarded for everything, and they have no grasp of what the future is like. Some of them don't even know how to write a complete sentence. Some of these Facebook posts or on Instagram, that's not the correct way to spell. If your child's not advancing their selves, teach them differently than the way that you were taught. I taught my children differently than what I was taught. What I was taught was my experience. It doesn't mean it has to be theirs. And that was it.
Most excellent. Most excellent. I think people can do a lot with that.
Thank you.
I mean, bottom line is, I always, these stories, man, it's like you guys are made out of some stuff that is just unbelievable you don't have to gone through all of that and to come out on the other side, like, at peace and, accepting and just ready to move on and not letting that stop you from doing what you want to do. You guys are an amazing group of women. Thank you for being in my world. That's all I can say.
I just want to thank you. I just actually came upon you a couple of months ago. And I've been binge watching you and listening to you in the car. My son rolls his eyes because he knows that your video, it's coming on. I don't care. You're driving my car. You're gonna listen to what I listen to. And and I've actually shared you with other ladies that are going through things, or if they don't want to listen, I tell them, the things, because these are things we need to know. We need to know we're better than what we, we're told that we were. So
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to drink my wine when I get off.
Girl, yes, and be sure to stick your pinky out when you do it. But now I have to say, one thing, Trina, you should never, ever think that there's nothing you can do. Just listen to everything that you accomplished. I mean, with the beginning that you had, girl, you got an MBA. You got another master's in HR. You're raising your kids. You are doing a stellar job considering what you had to fight against to get to where you are. You're an amazing person. I want you to hear me say that. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
You are doing the do. Good job.
Thank
you.
All
right. I'm very excited. I'm getting juiced up now. Like, I got me juice. Am I going to go back to school? Hell no. I'll leave that to you, brainiacs.
Not if you don't want these student loan payments, honey. Woo!
Yeah, now I don't even want a car note. I'm looking at my car. I'm about to do the Flintstone in this sucker because I don't want to buy another car. I'm so serious. Well, Trina, thank you very, very much, and look for this real soon. Make sure you come and visit under the video so that, you know, if people have questions for you or comments and stuff, you can respond to them. Okay?
Thank you, Deb.
Okay, I'll talk to you on the site.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.